Comment reads, won't avoiding illnesses at all costs make more people disabled? After COVID, there was a wave of children landing in ERs because they didn't have the immune system built up to fight common colds. No, from the bottom of my heart, hope that you listen. Please. COVID is just as severe now as it was in 2021, as it was in 2020. They lied. They lied to all of us. They cooked the books. They methodically and strategically propagandized us into believing it was over or that it was mild. In January of 2022, when Biden realized that vaccinated individuals would still be able to transmit the virus, they threw their hands up. They had already started pushing the narrative that Omicron was mild, when that was a lie. COVID maims our immune systems. There are literally hundreds upon thousands of studies demonstrating this. So we've known very early on that there was a lot of similarities between coronavirus and human immunodeficiency virus. This was published in the New York Times in 2020. In a disturbing parallel to human immunodeficiency virus, the coronavirus can cause a depletion of important immune cells, recent studies found. Infection Control Today tells us SARS-CoV-2 uses ACE2 receptors to infiltrate cells. Similar to HIV, SARS-CoV-2 can silently spread throughout the host's body and attack almost every organ. Dr. A.J. Leonardi, a T-cell immunologist, told us that UChicago had a preprint showing T-cell death in COVID more than HIV and a loss of naive T-cells. More T-cell death in COVID than HIV. A study published in the National Institute of Health, SARS-CoV-2 infection damages the CD8 T-cells, an effect akin to that observed in earlier studies showing long-term damage to the immune system after infection with virus such as hepatitis C or HIV. The Merck Manual Professional version tells us COVID-19 can cause acquired lymphocytopenia. AIDS patients routinely have this. Even Yale School of Public Health is saying it out loud. Dr. A.J. Leonardi was right. Altered immune system cells, viral reservoirs and fragments, immune dysregulation and chronic inflammation, triggered autoimmune conditions like blood clots and latent viruses. The National Institute of Health director states that COVID virus persists in the tissues and nerve cells. Now, in your comment, you specifically bring up the immunity debt theory. The immunity debt theory did not exist until COVID emerged. It didn't exist until they made everybody drop their masks and go back to work and be good little workers. Then when more and more kids started becoming ill, because schools and daycares are a vector, see, it would be far too easy to say, oh my, COVID is having long-lasting impacts on the immune system, as we've demonstrated in hundreds upon thousands of studies, and there's viral persistence, and it harms us. That wouldn't be good for capitalism or political strategy. So instead, they made up a theory called immunity debt. Now, while I am aware that I have shown you this article already, please, please, please just listen for a moment, please. This was at a time when RSV cases were surging. It fueled the speculation that pandemic mitigations, including lockdowns, created harmful immunity debt. Scientists have dismissed that concept as misguided. With all the discussion swirling around immunity debt, it shows how easy it is for plausible-sounding theory to circulate as misinformation, promoted the unfounded assertion that infections are clinically beneficial to children. There is no clinical benefit to being exposed to pathogens or being infected with disease-causing microbes. What prevailed was that the high and unseasonal RSV wave was the result of lockdowns. Our immune system is not a muscle. We're born with the vast majority of T cells that we will ever have. Our immune system is finite, it is limited. We knew at the time that immunity debt is bullshit. We knew at the time that COVID harms the immune system. We know all of the constant illness now, like the recent surge of whooping cough that has already killed 5 infants so far this year that were never exposed to lockdowns, or the rise in tuberculosis and fungal infections and pneumonias, still occurring at record rates. And we knew that the RSV then was a result of COVID, not lockdowns. And what would you know it? Several studies that found that the association of COVID-19 with RSV infections in children aged 0 to 5 in the USA in 2022, they found that a COVID-19 infection associated with a significantly increased risk for RSV infections among children aged 0 to 5 years old in 2022, and that COVID-19 contributed to the 2022 surge of RSV cases in young children through the large buildup of COVID-19 infected children and the potential long-term adverse effects of COVID-19 on the immune and respiratory system. Another study, which I will go into greater detail at a later time, called Too Many Deaths, Too Many Left Behind, a People's External Review of the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's COVID-19 Pandemic Response. The study found that the CDC communications, meaning still ongoing, downplay the impact and aerosol transmission risk of COVID-19. The guidance aligned with commercial and political interests over scientific evidence, that it emphasizes individual choice over population health. It's not just the immune system that COVID impacts. Research shows even mild COVID-19 can lead to equivalent of 7 years of brain aging each infection. Dr. Daniel Beckman, who is a researcher studying the effects of COVID on the brain, show us this comparison. We're literally utilizing tests that would typically be used for a traumatic brain injury on long COVID. And we see that a COVID infection is the equivalent of a traumatic brain injury and neuron death and inflammation, mild infections included. They also found SARS-CoV-2 can persist in our megakaryocytes, which is in our bone marrow. Which is no wonder why they are using a clinical trial of repurposed HIV antivirals in long COVID. And if not aware, reinfections are harmful. Compared to people who did not get reinfected, those with reinfection had a 2-fold increased risk of death, 3-fold increased risk of hospitalization, 3-fold increased risk of heart problems, 3-fold increased risk of blood clotting, as well as diabetes, fatigue, kidney problems, mental health disorders, musculoskeletal problems, neurologic disorders, and lung problems. The current research we have tells us that each infection gives us about a 10% risk of developing long COVID, but that also compounds. So by our third infection, we have about a 40% risk of developing it. And what so many people do not realize is that many symptoms that make a person suffer during an infection, like fever, malaise, headache, rash, result from the activities of the immune system trying to eliminate the infection from the body. All COVID has done is stopped our immune system from initially responding. In the case of SARS-CoV-2, less symptoms initially does not mean better or mild. Which may be why WHO just reported that COVID-19 pandemic reversed a decade of life expectancy gains. And why, among those 16 years of age and older, the disability rates have skyrocketed. But the general population doesn't know any of this because beginning in February of 2022, the Biden administration began downplaying it as a political strategy. That's when they began hiding the pandemic. The strategic guide for the Democrat Party politicians was written 2 years ago. It basically says to claim victory over SARS-CoV-2 and to quit talking about it if they want to win the midterm elections. They do not give a single flying fuck about us. Seriously, it's all about them.